Hello friends, I'm Nancy with Simply Quilting, and I've been working on my June Scrappy Quilt. I'm trying to make a scrappy quilt every month this year. The one I'm working on for this month, I have already done a tutorial on this, and I will link it in the description. This is a 16-inch crisscross star block with an interesting center. In my last video, I showed you how to put these extra corners on, and these parts were left over after I made the star blocks, and I thought I will just put those on the corners and kind of break up some of that white. So that's what I have done in this quilt block. But now I'm working on the alternate quilt block, and so I'm going to show you how I'm doing that. Now I made 6 of these, and I'm making 6 of the alternates, and then I will either use sashing or borders or both to extend it just a little bit. These are 16 inches though, so they're going to make a pretty good size little throat quilt. All right, so let me get these out of the way and readjust the camera, and then I'll show you how to make my alternate block. For this block, I'm going to need 4 6-inch background squares that I will place in each corner. And by the way, this is the same background fabric that I put on my star blocks, so they will kind of be all matchy-matchy. I'm going to put those right out in the 4 corners. Now the next thing is these 6-inch scrappy string pieced blocks. Oh, these aren't 6-inch, I'm sorry, these are 5-inch. Okay, so these are 6-inch and these are 5-inch. And like I said, these came from a strip set that I made from scraps. And then I just cut those into 5-inch squares and then folded those over and pressed them. All right, so I think I want the red to show rather than the blue, because I have a lot of them with blue in them. So I think I'm going to have the red showing this time with the blue center. My center pinwheel will be made from the leftovers from this. All right, so I'm going to put one of these in each corner with the red check facing up and the little blue tip. I'm placing these on the outside corners. Okay, so I'm going to take and stitch these on in the center, right in line with this background block. So let me start doing that. I'm going to go ahead and fold these back over before I trim them, just to make sure I've got good coverage all the way out to the corner. Okay, now I'll take my little triangular ruler. You can use any ruler that has a 1/4 inch line on it, marking on it. And I'll just trim those off. I do want to be pretty precise. I'm putting that line right there along the edge of my stitching, because I'm going to be using these pieces to make my center block, and I'm going to I want these to be in good condition, so I will be using those. Put these back in their corners. I'm pressing that out towards the scrappy part. All right. Make sure your scrappy corners are pointing out toward the corner of your board or whatever you're laying it out on. Now the next thing is to stitch these together along this long side of your triangle. Now on these, I'm going to press these toward the background. I know a lot of people say don't do that, press it to the dark. But when you have a lot of seams coming together, now I could open this up and then I would have dark going to dark and light going to light. You can do that if you'd like to, but unless it's really dark black or something like that, I don't worry about that too much. So I'm going to press these out towards my background. Gently push those corners or those seams, and then I will press them on the iron. Now I'm going to clip these little dog ears off just because they bother me having to sew over them. You could go ahead and stitch and then trim those off, but I find it easier just to go ahead and do it now before I stitch it together. Now then, it looks like I have very little of the red in my center. That's okay. It's a scrappy quilt, so I wonder if I could put this one over here. Yeah. And this one here, so that I'll have two bigger ones and two smaller ones. There won't be much of that red left in there by the time we get through doing this. And I'm not really worried if these don't exactly match up because that's all going to be trimmed off. The only thing I'm concerned about is getting these center points fairly together. So I'll start at the edge that I know where I know the points are going to be coming together to make this into a pinwheel. So I'll try and get those fairly even. If I have to trim them a little bit once I get them pressed, then I will. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to open these seams, these two seams. It won't take me but a minute, and it will make that center lie much flatter then. And I'm going to press that while I do that. Okay, I would usually be cutting over here, but I want you to kind of see what I'm doing, so I'm going to put it over here on this side. Now, as you can see, I have one that's fairly straight and one that's a little bit wonky. So I'm going to straighten that little wonky one up a little bit. So that I can get a nice smooth seam down the center. I might just go ahead and do the other one too. So what I'll do is match it down here on the ends and then just take that bow out of the middle. Okay. And we'll just match these in the center. And if you want to trim these little pieces off, that's perfectly fine as long as we don't trim it into the seam. And I think I'm going to do that on both of mine. Take some of that excess fabric out. Okay, so that will go together nicely, I think. I'll stick a pin in there. With Scrappy Quilt, you don't have to worry too much about having everything come out perfectly, but you do kind of want your seams to match. All right, now I'll go ahead and stitch that together. And I'm not worried about it matching up on the ends because this is going to be trimmed down quite a bit. It's going to be trimmed down to 6 inches. So it will match these. We'll wind up with a 9 patch when we're done here. So here's my center block pinwheel. As you can see, I lost a little bit of my red in there, but that's okay. Some of them come out perfectly and some of them don't. I think it'll be okay. Now, on this one, I have to trim it down to 6 inches. And for this, I'm going to use my little small Stripology top slot ruler. And I'm going to, let's see if I can get this a little bit closer, just in case you haven't seen this used before. All right, so I'm just going to lay my little block here in the middle. Now I've got lines on here horizontally and vertically, and I need to pick some lines and find a center mark that's kind of between the 0 and the 6. It kind of has enough coming off of each side to make it sort of pretty square. Here's my 6 and here's my 0, so it looks like I've got about 3/4 of an inch on each side. And I've got a white line here and another line here. I can line up with my inside seams. And then you need a 45-degree or larger. This little one won't work in these slots. So I'll just cut on the 0 now. And on the number 6, because I need a 6-inch block. All right, so that gives me these taken off. Now I'll just turn it the other direction and do the same thing. There's a blue line down here that I can line up and a blue line up there that I can line up, and that is exactly 6 inches that direction. Now let's see. Here's my line for this way, my line for that way. But I think I need to, yeah, that's about the same. between 1/2 and 3/4 that I'll be taking off. One little stitch there, and one little stitch here. Okay, now that took a lot of my blue off, but that's just the way it turns out. Now, I've got plenty of other stuff to put in here. Next, I need to make some 4 patches. And let me show you how I'm going to do that. I'll put this in the middle. And then line these back up. Now, so these may not be exactly 6 inches, but they're going to be 6 inches or a little bit more than 6 inches. And I will have some to trim off all the way around to trim this down to 16. Okay, now I need 8 background squares that are 3.5 inches square. And I need 4 of 2 different colors that sort of coordinate. So I've got my my brown and my red check that I'm going to use on those. So what I like to do is lay them out on here so that I'll kind of know what I'm going for. So I'll put my brown and my red and then my backgrounds. And those will make a 4 patch. Now I'm going to go ahead and lay the rest of them out as well. Since I've got brown here and red here, I need another brown here, because I'm making them go alternate. And then I'll need another red down here. Hope you can see that. Okay, and then my 2 backgrounds go right here. Okay, brown, red, brown, red. Now red, brown, red, and brown. Just alternating those. Okay, that looks like a mighty big block, but like I say, once we stitch it together and trim all of these down to 6 inches, we're going to be good. All right, so I'll start stitching these together. Now, if you wanted to make these little squares 3.25 instead of 3.5, you could do that and it would probably work. But I kind of like to be on the safe side of things. Okay, I'm going to press all these to the dark side. Now, let's see. I have to figure out how I did this again. I think I did it like that and like that. I compare all of my colors, make sure they're heading the right direction and in the right order. Okay, since I had a brown, started with the brown there, I'll start with the red here on the bottom. And then we'll have a red and another brown. Now I just have to sew these together. Okay, that looks like the correct order. Now then, I wonder if I can swirl these little seams. It's like maybe I can. Yeah, that worked out really well. Okay, so that's a swirly. Not sure who came up with the swirly idea, but it was a great idea, especially for 4 patches. Uncomplicated 4 patches, that is. Now, these all have to be squared up to 6 inches. If you wanted to cut these out at 3 1/4 instead of 3 1/2, you could probably do that, but it might be a little tight on some of them. So I'd rather just make them a little bit bigger and then square them up afterwards, kind of like you do with half square triangles. Or some people do with half square triangles. And then I'll just do my 0 and my 6. I'm telling you folks, this is a great invention here. Of course, I have the one just bigger than this too. I don't have the extra large one yet, but it's on my bucket list. Okay. See, this is about all we have on each side. About 1/8 of an inch on each side comes off. But then you have a nice square block to deal with. So much better. Really doesn't take too long, and I have done them 2 at once, but for the sake of this video, I'm just going to do 1 at a time. Okay, I believe we are ready to sew this big old 9 patch together. You can kind of start getting an idea of what the block is going to look like. All right, so we'll start stitching these together. I'm going to start with the center one. I thought there would be more blue showing, but I guess I cut off most of the blue. But some of my other blocks have a lot of blues, so it'll all even out. Now, one thing I forgot to say is that we want to match up our top row that's going to go towards the center. Same thing over here. We want to make sure this one is matched up. We don't care about so much about the bottom because we're going to be trimming this down. But make sure you do line up those. I'm just checking every time that I've got alternating squares in my 4 patches. Okay, now I can do, yeah, I can do this one now. Either way, it doesn't matter. This was the top one. And this middle one and these two should match perfectly on both sides, or pretty close to perfectly, because we squared all 3 of those up. All right. Now, we can either iron these out to the outside and these to the inside, or we can do the opposite, these to the outside and these to the inside. But I think it would be better to put, I think that's what I did on the others, was go to the outside this way in the center because of all these extra seams. That's what I'm going to do. Okay. And then these will go in. All right. 2 more seams and then square up the block. We will be done. I'm going to pin these before I stitch them together. Now, one thing I do like to do is to cut a little bit of this excess stuff off of here, off of my ends of my seams. Just make sure I don't cut into my seam itself. Just helps it to nest a little bit better, not to be bulky, as bulky. I am going to back stitch on these, but I'm going to come in just a little bit and then back stitch because we're going to take some of this off of here. It's not the most complicated block for sure, but it does take a little time to do the pinwheel and kind of press and trim as I go. But it makes such a nice block that I don't mind taking a little extra time for that. Just enjoy the journey. And there's our block. It just needs to be trimmed down to 16 inches. I'm going to fold it as close to in half as I can get it to start with. So I've got a seam over here to work with. Hold it on that seam as close as I can get. All right, so I've laid the fold of my block on the 0 mark on my cutting mat. Now I'm going to lay a straight edge ruler on the 8-inch mark because I have it doubled over. I'm going to put a little weight there. Just hold my ruler in place and cut on that 8-inch line on my mat. There's my somewhat 1/4 to 1/2 inch. Now, let's see how it measures out to 16 from the 0 mark. Well, just about perfect. Now I'm going to fold it the other direction. Lay that on my 0 mark. And then lay this on the 8-inch. Now let's see how we did on that one. 0 to 16 to 16. Okay, that's just about perfect. Or about as close as I can get to it anyway. So there is our block. Now I've already made some other ones, so let me lay those out and show them to you. Bring it back here a little bit so you can see. Okay, here's one with more blues and browns. And let's see, our next one is also more blues and browns. So see, that's why I wasn't worried about having a little extra red in that one. Here's one with some blues and reds and a little bit of brown. And then here's one with all 3 colors, a little bit of gold with red flowers. And I have one more that I need to make before I put them together with my star blocks. So I will put that on my sewing machine and probably tackle that next and get all of those done. And then I'll show you how I'm putting these all together. But I hope you enjoyed watching me do the alternate block. And remember that I have the star blocks and how I made the star blocks in another video. So I will link that video and the video where I did the corners on this in the show notes and also in the comment section so that you can go back and catch those if you didn't. So I'm anxious to get these put together. I think it's going to be a really cute quilt. Thanks for joining me, and I hope to see you all on my next video when I put these blocks together. God bless y'all. Have a great rest of your week.